Tonight on the Your Life Matters Show podcast.
Just because a person has, experienced some voyeuristic urges or something doesn't mean they're going to be a criminal.
Right.
Like it doesn't mean that they're going to start breaking the law immediately and, all bets are off, so to speak. So that's one. Another misconception is that shame or punishment alone will solve the problem. Something that always makes me laugh is I have had clients through the years. They'd say, hey Eric, you're in Indiana, weed is legal everywhere but there. Do you think you'll smoke it when it's legal? And I'm like, it was illegal when I was smoking it and I didn't care. So it doesn't really matter to me whether it's legal or not. That's not why I quit.
Behind every struggle, there's a story, and every story deserves to be heard. This is the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Your hosts are Steve Hodgson and licensed psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Tonight's episode is titled Voyeuristic Disorder. When watching becomes an obsession, have you ever wondered where curiosity ends and a mental health disorder begins? Most people have heard the term voyeur before. It's often used in movies, television shows, or news stories. But few people understand that voyeuristic disorder is a recognized mental health condition that goes far beyond simple curiosity. What drives someone to secretly watch others without their knowledge? Is it about power, control, sexual gratification, or is there something deeper happening beneath the surface? And perhaps the most important question of all, can these thoughts and behaviors be treated? Voyeuristic disorder is often misunderstood. It's surrounded by stigma, misconceptions, and uncomfortable conversations that many people would rather avoid. Yet understanding difficult topics is often the first step toward prevention, awareness, and helping those who may be struggling. Tonight, we're taking a respectful and educational look at a condition that affects individuals, families, relationships, and communities. We'll explore what voyeuristic disorder is, how mental health professionals understand it, what causes it, how it differs from criminal behavior, and what treatment options may be available. As always, our goal is not to judge or sensationalize. Our goal is to educate, inform, and encourage meaningful conversation about mental health. Welcome to the Your Life Matters Show podcast, because understanding the human mind matters. Please note prior to watching this episode discusses voyeuristic disorder and related sexual behaviors from an educational and mental health perspective. Viewer discretion is advised. This program is intended for educational purposes only. Here are your hosts.
Well, howdy, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast, where we have honest conversations about mental health, personal growth, and the challenges that impact our lives every day. I'm your host, Steve Hodgson. As always, I'm joined by a man whose job it is to help you untangle the mess inside your head, hold up a mirror while you're being too hard on yourself, and figure out exactly why you are the way you are. Our Indiana licensed psychotherapist, Dr. Eric L. Davis.
And help you appreciate your full head of hair.
That's right. Okay.
That's right.
And we've had some guests make some comments about grooming.
Yes, we have.
Okay. And, we want to make sure that, that they didn't mean us. Even though I probably need to shave again here anyway. But now, before we delve deeper into a very important topic, again, we want to thank and welcome our sponsor, Waypost Counseling. Now, why do we do so many shows on mental health disorders? When we're doing them, we're helping people see themselves or parts of themselves in the topics that we cover. Many may decide that they need a place to turn to for guidance and assistance. So we want you to know at Waypost Counseling, you can either go to the office or do sessions from anywhere in the U.S. by computer, right from the comfort of your own home. So I ask that you please just give them a little listen.
Maybe you didn't expect to hear this today, But if you're watching right now, this might be for you. Life can feel heavy sometimes, not overwhelming all at once, just quietly difficult. You're feeling stress, anxiety, thoughts that don't seem to slow down. You are trying as hard as you can, but your body wants that next hit. Or maybe it's your relationship, where conversations feel harder, and the connection that you once experienced just doesn't feel the same anymore. You tell yourself, I am not going to be so abusive the next time. Or maybe it's something more private, like gambling, something that started small, but now it's affecting more than you ever expected. And maybe part of you keeps thinking, I should be able to handle this on my own. But you don't have to. At Waypost Counseling, support is available for individuals, for couples, and for those struggling with addiction. And you can access it from the privacy of your own home. Through secure online sessions, you can talk to someone who understands without pressure, without judgment. It's just a space to be heard. Something inside you is saying, maybe it's time. Trust that feeling. Contact Waypost Counseling today. Call 317-762-0904 or dial 317-659-0179. Also, you can visit waypostcounseling.com for more information. Because your life matters, and everyone deserves support along the way. Make the call today.
Now, today's topic is one that many have probably heard about, but probably like most of us, even myself, really don't understand. It's discussed in movies, television shows, news reports, and true crime stories, but rarely from a mental health perspective. So we're going to talk about voyeuristic disorder and our episode When Watching Becomes an Obsession.
Now, before we begin, we want to remind everyone that today's discussion is intended strictly for educational and mental health awareness purposes. Our goal is not to sensationalize this topic or excuse harmful behavior in any way, shape, or form. Instead, we're here to better understand the psychology behind it, the impact it can have, and the treatment options that may be available.
In the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a bunch of shows on some other disorders that, we haven't covered. And the same thing holds true for that. We're not doing it sensationalized, but we want to make sure we cover them. We can support the people understand, that this is a mental health show. And, we promise we're going to be as respectful as possible when we cover the topics.
Yeah, always.
So, Dr. Davis, so let's begin. I think when many people hear the word voyeurism, they immediately picture some kind of criminal act or even something you read in a tabloid. But before we go any further, can you help us understand exactly what voyeuristic disorder is and how mental health professionals define it?
Yeah, so voyeurism, it refers to the act or interest of observing another person for sexual gratification. So in voyeuristic disorder, that is a mental health diagnosis with very specific criteria. So it involves recurrent, intense sexual arousal from observing someone who is unsuspecting, who is naked, undressing, or engaging in sexual activity. So additionally, the individual has either acted on those urges with a non-consenting person or experiences significant distress or impairment because of those urges. So the diagnosis is only made in individuals who are at least 18 years old.
Right. So we're not talking about like the nosy neighbor who's watching you mow the front lawn.
No.
That's
just nosy.
Right, it's just nosy. I want to make sure that people understand that. Just say, my neighbor, she watches everything that we do. She's got a voyeuristic disorder. No, this is for their own sexual gratification.
Yes.
So, it's safe to say that then that most voyeurs don't have voyeuristic disorder.
I mean, true. Yeah, because if voyeurism is just watching people, that are unsuspecting, or people watching, it's definitely, that's not voyeuristic disorder.
Especially like when I grew up in New York, there's a lot of times, even when I was with my girlfriend and stuff like that, we'd sit on the park bench, along the street, we have them like along the curbs and stuff in certain parks. And, we used to do this thing when we were bored, nothing to do. We'd sit and watch people walk by.
Yeah.
You know, now in New York, you had a lot of, you could fashion. Especially I grew up in Greenwich Village, folks. You saw fashion. Yeah, whether you liked it or not, there was some fashion you saw. But it was always interesting just to observe people. Okay, but
Yeah.
that, we weren't being, you know, that's not a voyeuristic disorder.
Yeah. And voyeurism is sexual in
Right. Yeah.
nature, you know?
hmm Now, does this condition affect children as well as adults?
As for children, they may display age appropriate curiosity about, bodies or sexuality, but voyeuristic disorder, it's never diagnosed in anyone younger than 18 because adolescent curiosity is developmentally different from the disorder itself.
Right. So somebody, you know, would grow out of that, you know, and they're
Yeah.
just being, you know, the child, just a curious child, you know, and other than, you know, years later when they get a telescope, you know, looking in somebody's window, your bedroom window. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, is this considered a rare disease or is it more common than most people realize?
It's really the truth is it's difficult to know exactly how common it is because many people never seek treatment or even disclose that they're having those types of thoughts. So it's likely underreported because of, the stigma, embarrassment, fear of legal or social consequences. It's considered relatively uncommon, but it's probably more prevalent than most of the statistics suggest.
Now, I was going to say, how about sex? But I think I'm going to rephrase it. How about gender? Okay. What I mean is that is it just as common in women as it is in men?
No, it's so voyeuristic disorder is diagnosed overwhelmingly more often in men than in women. Women can experience voyeuristic interest, but both research and clinical experience indicate that the disorder is a lot more common among men.
Which is why they say men are pigs, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
If we get away with that, because it's more men, okay, that's doing it. So let me ask you, what criteria, when we talk about voyeuristic disorder, there has to be criteria that's got to be met
Yeah.
before you diagnose somebody. What is some of that criteria?
So firstly, the person has experienced recurrent, intense sexual arousal from observing an unsuspecting person, like I said, who's in a state of undress or engaged in sexual activity, and this has to have taken place for at least 6 months. Second, they have either acted on these urges or the urges cause significant distress. So, and they have to be at least 18 years old. So, really, what we're looking for is the level of distress that, this is causing. And that's a big part of the diagnostic criteria.
What popped into my head, and I guess is probably an interesting question that may have popped into some other user said, let's say you're, you know, I think it would be more if you're living in the city, you know, more than living in the suburbs, like
Mhm.
but you know, you're going to, you know, adjust your blind or close your blind, and all of a sudden you look out and right across like, you know, the building in the back, you know, you see someone having sex,
Mhm.
you know, people are there, and you know, that's not really voyeuristic disorder. You
Yeah.
know, that'd be more like curiosity, unless you're going back every single night now
Yeah.
and you're pleasuring yourself, let's put it that way,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
watching something like this. Yeah. You know, I just want to make sure you don't, I'm like, hey, hon, you look, you know, what's going
Yeah.
on over here? There's a difference there, yeah, between the two.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So many people wonder where the line exists, like as I was saying here, I guess, between curiosity, fantasy, and even a diagnosable disorder. So how do you distinguish between those differences?
So, I mean, curiosity about sexuality is a normal part of human development. Like that is, there's no doubt about that. So, we have to understand that fantasies alone aren't a mental disorder. Like,
Mm.
just because someone fantasizes does not mean that there's a mental disorder happening. The concern arises when it centers on when it's a sexual interest centered on non-consenting people, and when that becomes persistent, causes distress, interferes with daily life, I mean, that's where we consider a diagnosis or begin to consider that being the diagnosis.
And folks, don't hold me as being correct. I could remember reading back when I was younger. Um, my wife says I can't even remember what I had for dinner last night, but for some reason I remember this, that I was reading one of Elvis's bodyguards books, and they say to make love to Priscilla, that he used to first have to look in the other room, and he had it set up that he could peek watching one of his bodyguards having sex with some girl, then get aroused, and then was able to go in with Priscilla.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that would be a voyeuristic disorder, and I probably a couple of different disorders in
Yeah.
itself. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking sexually, that's and I'm trying to touch very lightly for
Yeah.
censorship reasons, and even for people that are watching. But there's that has to be that sexual element involved.
Yeah. And it's non-consenting,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
exactly. Right.
people.
Yeah. Well, I think in the situation with Elvis's bodyguard, maybe the bodyguard was consenting to it, but I'm not sure that the
Yeah.
person who he was with was
Yeah.
consenting too. So, um, are there risk factors associated with voyeuristic disorder?
Yes. Some possible risk factors include early sexual experiences that reinforce voyeuristic behavior, or difficulties forming healthy, intimate relationships, compulsive sexual behavior, impulsivity, and other co-occurring mental health conditions that can definitely increase the chances, you know. But having any of those risk factors doesn't automatically mean someone's going to develop that disorder.
Plus, the risk of going to jail
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
illegal to do.
Hmm.
Peeping Tom, there you're going to jail for that too. And like you say, it's one thing if you happen curiosity and see it once, but when it affects your relationship,
Yeah.
when that is your main source of pleasure, and stuff's coming from that, starting to rewire your brain
Yeah.
a little bit. The pleasure section of your brain. That's the only way you can get pleasure. Then there's a problem with
Yeah.
that. So yeah. Um, so what are some of the misconceptions people who struggle with voyeuristic disorder that you'd like to clear up?
I mean, I think one of them is, just because a person has, experienced some voyeuristic urges or something doesn't mean they're going to be a criminal. You know,
Right.
like it doesn't mean that they're going to start breaking the law immediately and, all bets are off, so to speak. So that's one. Another misconception is that shame or punishment alone will solve the problem. You know, what always something that always makes me laugh is I've had clients through the years. They'd say, hey Eric, you're in Indiana, like it weed is legal everywhere but there. Do you think you'll smoke it when it's legal? And I'm like, it was illegal when I was smoking it and I didn't care, so it doesn't really matter to me whether it's legal or not. That's not why I quit. you
Right.
know but I mean, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, was
See,
that
I'm in
even?
Florida here. See, I'm in Florida where it's legal, but I have
Yeah.
no, use to want to do it. And and if you have any questions about that, go back to our show on cannabis. Okay.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you'll learn, that it's not, I'm not trying to sound like old fogies and stuff, but there's a lot of health risks
Yeah.
that they've learned involved with that too. And yeah, it's strange, you don't expect the person is not going to, start breaking into your backyard,
Yeah.
hopping fences and stuff and do it. They have their ways of getting their excitement. And actually, I've even saw on one that there's actually videos for people like that they get them like that, they're watching a video of
Hmm.
watching into someone's window,
Yeah.
and the people, people engaging in sex. I mean, we live in a crazy world.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So these voyeuristic urges, we said, not going to really engage in illegal or harmful behavior, but how does it really impact relationships, marriages, family dynamics when it goes untreated?
Well, so one of the big things that is trust. It can seriously damage the trust in relationships, because partners often experience feelings of, betrayal, dishonesty, emotional distance. And then, you know, that behavior can lead to conflict. Families are often affected not just by the behavior itself, but, the secrecy surrounding that behavior.
And think about it. I mean, I can't imagine, you find out, your husband, because we're saying it's predominantly men, your wife finds out the husband is secretly watching, the neighbors having sex.
Yeah.
And they're pleasuring themselves. What starts to happen too, a lot of times the wife starts to think, and same thing with internet porn. Well, I'm not good anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
You don't get excited by me, you get excited by somebody else. And that I'm sure, Erin deals with a lot of that with family
Hmm.
counseling, marriage counseling and stuff too.
Yeah.
So let's say someone realizes that they have these thoughts, urges, okay, and wants help. What does treatment look like for them?
So typically we would treat, like voyeuristic disorder with cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mhm.
and cognitive behavioral therapy is typically the type of therapy that most therapists use, most often. And really it addresses unhealthy thinking patterns, helps a person to develop healthier coping skills, and really, like manage impulses and really address a lot of the thinking, and even if the thinking isn't addressable, addressing the behavior based on that thinking. So, like a good treatment plan would involve accountability and relapse prevention, those sorts of things.
So what about support groups? Are there support groups for that?
There actually are. So, um, there are some support groups that people can um, participate in. There's also medications that can sometimes be, helpful, such as SSRIs, um, or even in high risk situations, medications that reduce sex drive. That can be helpful.
So what would that SSRI drug do? What is
Um,
it meant to do?
to reduce obsessive thoughts and the compulsive
Gotcha.
behaviors.
Okay, right. Okay, there we go. Okay. Now I'm just curious, and I'm sure other people listening
Yeah.
are wondering what that would do. Okay, so is treatment really what I guess maybe the question, let me rephrase the question. Is the prognosis all usually very positive if
Yeah, I mean,
somebody
I would
gets
think
treatment?
it definitely, it's like any other mental health diagnosis. It's never a death sentence,
Mm,
and it's not, most conditions are not untreatable.
right.
I mean, so, there would definitely be a positive prognosis so long as the person's addressing the issues, and doing what they need to do to address those things.
Yep. So we're gonna hit that time again.
It's the lightning round.
Yes, but it's our educational lightning round. Now, Dr. Davis and I will do a educational lightning round. Short questions, educational answers, and that's why we're doing this. Just sort of sums up a lot of what today's episode is about. Okay, and first two are myth or fact. Okay, everyone who engages in voyeuristic behavior has voyeuristic disorder.
Myth.
Right. Okay, another myth or fact. Curiosity alone is enough for a diagnosis of voyeuristic disorder.
Myth.
Now, can someone experience voyeuristic urges and never act on them?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll talk about that, I guess. One word or phrase, what's the biggest misconception about people having voyeuristic disorder?
That having an urge equals an action. I mean, we have thoughts and don't act on them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, who have you ever thought about robbing a bank? Sure, me too, but I've never said, like, threatened to, and I've never done it. or attempted to do it. So, it's like that urge or that thought didn't cause any problems.
Right. So is voyeuristic disorder considered treatable?
Yes. With appropriate treatment, it can be managed a lot of the times.
So true or false, seeking professional help early on can help improve outcomes.
Yes. In all caps. Yes.
Right. Now, what's yeah, especially before you get the handcuffs on. But what's one warning sign that someone should consider speaking with a mental health professional?
If they're finding it difficult to control things, on a daily basis or in their relationships, like if it's causing problems, if it's a source of contention, it's probably time to take a look at it.
So, what's one thing family members should avoid doing if they discover a loved one is struggling with the issue?
Like it's okay to be upset, but only responding with shame and anger is not going to really help. It's okay, this is upsetting, and I'm here to how are we going to address this,
Right.
basically.
Remember, the person has a problem.
Yeah.
That I'm sure they're not doing it because, it's a fun thing to do. They're not doing it for you. They're doing it because it's like a drug addict or an alcoholic. They're doing it because they have a problem.
Yeah, it doesn't excuse the behavior, but
Right, exactly.
the they've got a problem they need to deal with.
Mm-hmm. So, in one sentence, why is understanding disorders like this important for society?
Because the better we understand these different disorders, the better we can treat them, and the better we can combat the stigma surrounding them. And I think that like we talked about, the stigma with, for example, voyeuristic disorder is just because someone has a voyeuristic thought or a voyeuristic urge doesn't mean that, well, yep, they absolutely meet that criteria. They may, but we don't know.
Right. So we're going to go to the last one, which is a fill in the blank. The most important thing I want viewers to remember about voyeuristic disorder is
It's a treatable mental health condition.
Yep.
And there's help available.
now I kept this page over here because we talked about the someone experiencing the urges but never acts on them. And we even talked about it in a couple of the other ones. Do they seek help for that? I mean, what if someone has, a kinky, I'm trying to think of ways to phrase this, folks. So, and coming out the right way here. Someone has fantasies. Okay,
Mhm.
can voyeurism be a fantasy for someone and not be something that's considered a disorder?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can fantasize about anything. It's so the fantasy itself is not the issue. It's is the person acting on that? Are they
Right.
are they victimizing others for their own gratification?
And I guess another thing, are they consumed by it?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
if they're
exactly.
consumed on it, then that's probably the word. If you're consumed by that thought and
Mhm.
constantly the thought, then yes, you probably should seek help
Yeah.
right away. If it's something that just, hey, I'd like to see this, and that, yeah,
Yeah.
that could just be, that. But if that's all you think about,
Yeah.
all the
My
time,
rule of thumb is always if I'm wondering if something may be a problem,
mhm,
I probably need to address it.
right,
Like it's
exactly,
okay, doesn't mean I have to do something about it, but I need to look into it and see if this may be. And the reality is I don't wonder that about things that aren't remotely problems.
right, exactly,
So that's my rule of thumb is, use some brutal self-honesty. And if you're wondering if something's a problem, it probably is, and just err on that side to be safe
right,
and address
exactly,
it. And hey, worst case scenario or best case scenario, however you want to look at it, you know, hey, you go to a professional and they say, "Oh no, I'm not seeing that at all," and then
right,
but if it
exactly.
is something that you're dealing with, now you can address it and make it better.
If you think it's a problem, it's because it's really something prevalent in your head
Yeah,
that's pressing.
yeah.
That's really what it is. Because, like you said, how many times a day kill that guy? Okay,
Well, here, let me ask
but
this.
you don't mean that you're actually going to go and kill that guy.
Right. Let me ask you this question. Like, Um, I bet there was never a time in your life where, like with your breathing,
Hmm.
where it was a beautiful summer day, beautiful outside, and you're like, man, I'm breathing so well. This might be an issue. It's like, no, it's when we start having difficulty, when my breathing, like if I'm not if I don't have as much energy, or like those are the things that tell us to look. It's gonna be a problem typically, if I think it
I
may
think
be.
even with me, I remember, sometimes it's hard to remember that one moment
Yeah,
where you do. We were in Kentucky and went to some cave. It was with our friends Elvin and Shauna, my wife Jen and I, and we were in some big cave that we went to visit. And to come out of the cave, there was like, I call it a three-story walk up of
yeah,
steps. That's all I can say. It's a born and raised in New York City. It's like walking up three flights of stairs, we used to call it. And the one thing to be out of breath, when walking up, especially I was a little overweight and stuff, say that. But
yeah.
when I got halfway up the steps and had to stop,
Hmm.
okay, when I realized at that point there's something else going on here. There's
Yeah,
a bigger problem that I need to address. And I
yep,
remember that's literally what it was. And I was so it took me forever to get up the steps, but I was so thankful when I got to the top. Okay, I mean,
yeah,
Jen's comment was, it's about time. I was like, yeah, but that's when I said to her, we really need to seek this,
yeah.
and find some information about it. So, we touched the question before last. We touched on this very lightly, but okay, so if you find your spouse or partner or even a family member and you find out that they have this voyeuristic tendency, let's call it an urge,
Mhm.
okay, how do you suggest that someone handle that?
The first thing is don't freak out, like try to approach it with some love and understanding, but it's okay, like it does not excuse the behavior. So um, that would be the thing is if I'm going to be here for this person, then we've got an issue we need to deal with together,
Right.
you know. If not, then that's
And I can see it being even hard on a spouse if it's a spouse's sister or even their
sure.
child and stuff
Yeah,
like that. I can see them wanting to go off, right off and, just explode right there. But that's not going to help. Same thing with a drug addict. It's not going to help them or an
yeah.
alcoholic to do that. So I want to keep that in mind. So the last question I want to ask before we wrap up, what's the most important thing that we want our viewers to understand about voyeuristic disorder that they may not have known before they watched this episode?
That it is a medically diagnosed disorder. It's a real thing. And that there's help available, and it's like any other mental health diagnosis. If you do, like if you're wondering, oh, well, maybe this is something I'm dealing with, even if you go and if that is the diagnosis, it is not a death sentence. It's treatable. There's help available. Don't count yourself out over an obstacle. This is deal withable and figure outable. That's what I would say.
And that's why we're going to present a bunch of these disorders here.
Hmm.
Because we want people to understand that, that they're not just sickos, but to lack of a better word that came to my head there, not a bunch of sickos or pervs or something like that.
Yeah.
These are people that have a serious issue that
Hmm.
they need to deal with, and we need to view it from that side.
Yeah.
We talked about some of the
And
past
and
issues.
and it's just like with any type of addiction or any of that, we also that, like we need to understand the person did not ask for this disorder. Okay. They
No,
didn't ask for that. It's not that, it's not something that's happening
that they
because they're
chose, right.
by choice, but they are accountable for dealing with it,
Right.
you know?
And we said it in the past about, like, if you go to the Walmart or something like that, and you see an overweight person,
Hmm.
getting on one of the carts and stuff like that. We've said that in the past. Right away, first, oh, lazy, you're overweight. But again, you don't know if they have a thyroid condition.
Yeah.
And you would probably, if you knew that, the way you're approaching the whole visual and how you act towards that person is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
And that's what we're hoping with some of the shows we're about to run, is that if you're aware of it and you're aware it's a disorder, you'll look at it from a more educational and knowledgeable side than
Mhm.
just overreacting to what's going on.
Yeah.
We even had one topic we have coming up that Dr. Davis and I even had to look up.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, we
weren't
did.
even too sure. We knew once we said what it was, we knew what it was, but we just never knew the title for it. But
Yeah.
at least, that's the idea. We want to try to help people. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Davis, thank you for helping us navigate a topic that many people may have heard about, but very few truly understood.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today's discussion is that understanding a mental health condition is not the same as condoning harmful behavior. Education allows us to separate the myths from the facts, reduce the stigma, and have informed conversations about subjects that are difficult sometimes.
Mental health is often complex, and sometimes the topics that make us the most uncomfortable are the ones we need to understand the most. By learning about these disorders, their impact, and how the treatment options are available, we can promote awareness, encourage accountability, and help connect people with the support that they need.
If you found today's discussion informative, consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing the video with someone you think may benefit from hearing our message.
Also don't forget to visit our website at yourlifematterspodcast.com for more information about our show, some licensed merchandise, and an avenue if you'd like to become a guest on our show as well.
If you or someone you know struggling with mental health challenges, help is available. In the United States or anywhere else, you can pick up a phone and call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And we're going to say that every episode at least once, if not 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Okay. So on behalf of Dr. Eric L. Davis and myself, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. And remember, understanding human mind matters. And more importantly, your life does matter. So
Yes,
God
it
bless
does.
you. I hope you join us again next week for another great episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share the episode so more people can be part of these important conversations around mental health. And remember, your life matters. We hope to see you again next week.